Khalilzad, for the last 2 decades, if not 4, was busy in Afghanistan fooling the poor Afghan people. He was taking advantage of the Afghan people. In fact, he is one of the 10 reasons why Americans failed in Afghanistan. Now, Khalilzad is kind of caught in the net, and he is trying to do the same thing he was doing in Afghanistan. He's trying to mislead the American people. To fool the Afghan people is way easier because, one, we're so poor and desperate. 40 years of war, lack of information, lack of courage, plus Khalilzad, USA's envoy in Afghanistan, one of the most powerful people in Afghanistan. Even if you knew what Khalilzad was doing, you couldn't do anything about it. So it was easy to fool the people of Afghanistan. But to fool or take advantage of American people, especially American media, it is way more challenging. Face the Nation, Margaret from CBS had an interview, a wonderful interview with Khalilzad. She was kind of cornering Khalilzad right and left, right and left. And all Khalilzad was doing to throw up some lies, same thing that he was doing in Afghanistan. Misleading information. He was trying to do the same thing that he was doing in Afghanistan for the last 40 years. I can count all of them from A to Z and prove that Khalilzad was lying from A to Z. But I'm going to mention a couple things from that show and what Khalilzad was saying, which is really important. Margaret.
Welcome to the program.
It's great to be with you, Margaret.
You have spent more time with the Taliban than any American.
Mm-hmm.
You were intimately involved with this negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, said this was a strategic failure, the end of America's longest war.
It was a strategically failure.
He said the enemy is now in charge in Kabul. Do you share that view?
Well, I think there is a lot of anger and a lot of resentment about what has happened.
Well, I think there is a lot of anger and a lot of resentment, blah, 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 blah. To me, this whole show, Khalilzad was saying blah, 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 blah. Nothing else. But listen to this.
On the issue of building a democratic Afghanistan, I think that did not succeed, the struggle.
So the first one, he says we didn't succeed. We didn't build a democratic Afghanistan. For the last 20 years, they were begging Taliban to come back and to make peace with them. And finally, they signed a very shameful so-called peace treaty. And they wanted to build a democratic society. But for this, and in that one, he says, we didn't succeed. But in the second one,
I think we went to Afghanistan to make sure that those who had participated in the 9/11 attack were brought to justice, and that Al-Qaeda would never be able to use Afghanistan or any other terrorist group to attack the United States again. I think with regard to terrorism, we largely have achieved our objective.
Khalilzad, American military has perhaps billions of dollars at their disposal only to gather intelligence. Listen to General Milley, one of the toppest military officials in America. In this regard, what he says.
A reconstituted al-Qaeda or ISIS with aspirations to attack the United States is a very real possibility. And those conditions, to include activity in ungoverned spaces, could present themselves in the next 12 to 36 months.
General Milley, what's your opinion about the Taliban?
And we must remember that the Taliban was and remains a terrorist organization, and they still have not broken with al-Qaeda.
But what did we do, General Milley, for the last 20 years when we were in Afghanistan?
There's no doubt in my mind that our efforts prevented an attack on the homeland from Afghanistan, which was our core mission.
The only thing we did, we prevented for the last 20 years attacks on America that to be orchestrated from Afghanistan. That's all. But we didn't prevent Afghanistan to become the safe haven for terrorism and terrorists. Khalilzad is one of the most corrupt American officials in Afghanistan. In 2009, he was lobbying for Ashraf Ghani to become the president. I can write a book, sitting in here, I can write a book about Ghani, but more than that, or just simply, I put Ghani's laughter for you. Just see, look at this laughter. Does it look normal to you? But Khalilzad lobbied for this guy. And while Ghani was president, thousands and thousands and thousands of Afghans were being slaughtered. Our soldiers in their bunkers, military bunkers, they were slaughtered by the Taliban, who were released from jails by Ghani, and they were put in military. They became sleeping cells in our military bunkers. Now, President Biden says that Afghan military didn't have the will to fight. They were not getting paid that little money that we were paying them, $100 a month. They didn't have life insurance, they didn't have health insurance, and they were not even getting enough food to eat. Sometimes they had to go out in the neighborhood and beg for food from the neighbors. More importantly, they had their order from Ashraf Ghani, the president, not to fire at Taliban, except if they enter your bunker, then you can fire. Taliban were attacking, killing them, but they didn't have permission to shoot. I feel sorry for that $84 billion that we spent for the Afghan military. And in 3 days, they fell down on the laps of the Taliban. In fact, American officials, with their wrong policies, paved the road for the fall of the Afghan government and the Afghan military. I don't know why people in Washington, they are surprised. Mr. Austin, Secretary of Defense, why you're surprised? Didn't you know anything about the Afghan military and their situations? But anyway, I am not going to say a lot about Zulmay Khalilzad. I am talking about that peace treaty, that so-called peace treaty, that shameful peace treaty that Americans signed with the Taliban, a terrorist group, in 2020. One thing that I want American people and American media to know, which I talked about this in my show at that time, that the day Khalilzad was signing that so-called peace treaty, Pompeo, the Secretary of State, in person went there in Doha, Qatar, to be there while they are signing. Let's listen to General Milley. What's his opinion or what he wants us to know about the Doha Agreement.
Under the Doha Agreement, the United States will begin to withdraw its forces contingent upon the Taliban meeting certain conditions, which would lead to a political agreement between the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan. There were 7 conditions applicable to the Taliban and 8 to the United States. While the Taliban did not attack the United States forces, which was one of the conditions, it failed to fully honor any other condition under the Doha Agreement, and perhaps most importantly for the United States national security, the Taliban has never renounced their linkages with al-Qaeda or broke their affiliation with them.
Out of so many conditions on Americans, we did everything. Thank you, Taliban. And out of so many conditions on Taliban, except one, they didn't do anything.
When you talk to, as I have, former Afghan officials, or when you listen to General Milley or General McKenzie testify on Capitol Hill, they go all the way back to that 2020 deal you negotiated.
Right.
And they say that was the moment.
Right.
That was the moment when America signed this deal that it was incredibly demoralizing to Afghan forces.
Why did we even sign this peace deal with the Taliban? Why we simply didn't leave Afghanistan and call it good? But anyway, let's go to Doha. The day that Khalilzad was signing the peace agreement with the Taliban and Pompeo was there. This is the Taliban group in Doha. Please see how they march. Mr. Secretary of Defense, Mr. Austin, I'm asking you, do you know what is written on their flags? You might know the wording or somebody tell you the wording, but do you really know what it means and why they have that? Although some American officials want to say that ISIS or Al-Qaeda is against Taliban, they are different. No. Their flag is the same thing. Only the color. Their flag is black with the same writing. Taliban's flag is white with a black writing. Same meaning, same ideology, same mentality. But do you know what it means, what is in that flag? That day we were signing peace deal with the Taliban, a superpower with a terrorist group of 10,000 soldiers or 10,000 terrorists. They marched there, and then one of the leaders, Khalilzad, gave a fiery speech.
درس کاله مخکې او یو قرن مخکې لمانځل چې هغه د انګریزانو له شکست سره و او د روسانو له شکست سره و نن لله الحمد موږ چې دغو بچیان یو با له 1900 کلو شلو کلو جهاد او سرښندنې نه دغه ورځ لمانځو چې تاسو به وینئ چې له دغو څخه یو څو لحظې وروسته به انشاءالله زموږ د اسلامي امارت قیادت به د امریکایانو اشغالګرو سره د دوی د قواو د خروج او د افغانستان د مجاهدینو د فتح توافقنامه لاسلیک کوي.
Just like our fathers who rubbed the nose of Russians and Britons on the ground and kicked them out of Afghanistan, today Americans are retreating from Afghanistan, the American occupiers.
Over the course of our nation's longest war, 2,461 of our fellow Americans made the ultimate sacrifice, along with more than 20,000 who still bear the wounds of war, some of which cannot be seen on the outside. Now, we can discuss and debate the decisions, the policies, and the turning points since April of this year, when the President made clear his intent to end American involvement in this war. And we can debate the decisions over the last 20 years that led us to this point. But the one thing not open to debate is the courage and compassion of our service members, who, along with their families, served and sacrificed to ensure that our homeland would never again be attacked the way it was on September 11, 2001.
Close to 1 million American men and women in uniform served in Afghanistan. Close to 3,000 lost their precious lives. Close to 20,000 wounded. Tens of thousands of Afghan soldiers. Hundreds of thousands of Afghan civilians lost their lives for the last 20 years. I mean, while you want us to be proud of all those American men and women who fought in Afghanistan, did you know what they were saying in that Doha before signing the peace with us? Were we surrendering to the Taliban? Did we lose? Were we running out of Afghanistan? So if we were, how can we be proud that 1 million men and women who served in Afghanistan, American military, the most lethal force in the world, were they really running away from the 10,000 terrorists? Why Khalilzad and Pompeo allowed Taliban to say these things? Why in American media nobody talked about this? Why American government didn't know about this? In Afghanistan, we say, "Kunet mekhara." Sorry, I have to translate this. It means, is your ass itching? And it means, why you're talking about this? Somebody may revoke your citizenship and kick you back to Afghanistan. And that, for me, is equal to death sentence. But I cannot keep quiet. I feel sorry for those hundreds of billions of American dollars which was wasted in the name of Afghan war. I am burning for the lives lost in Afghanistan, those close to 3,000 Americans, and so many people served in Afghanistan. It hurts me to see it ended like this. And also, as Afghan, I'm an Afghan American. My one side is burning for America, the other side is burning for Afghanistan. When I see 8 million Afghans only in Kabul, they don't have food to eat, they cannot go to school, they don't have job, they don't have money, it burns me. And it all could be prevented. Khalilzad should be prosecuted. Khalilzad should be sitting in a jail right now.